Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel. So this is my complete review for WandaVision. Is it season 1? Is it the complete series? It's not really known at this point. Kevin Feige did hint that some Disney Plus series that they make will get additional seasons while some won't. I have a feeling that WandaVision might be a single season series, so a mini-series at the end of the day. But we'll see. We'll see what happens in the future, but right now this is my review for the full 9 episodes of WandaVision. I already reviewed the first 2, talked about how I really liked them, how they really captured the look and style and spirit of those old sitcoms like Bewitched and The Dick Van Dyke Show. But there really wasn't a whole lot to them in terms of actual story. It was just like watching a sitcom that happened to star 2 of the former underutilized Avengers, because now with this series, both characters, especially Wanda Maximoff, feel more important than ever. This review will contain spoilers. The finale aired a week ago, so if you haven't seen it, that's on you. And I also will be jumping around from episode to episode. I'm basically going to treat this review like I did with The Mandalorian Season 2, where rather than going episode by episode, I'm just going to look at this as one entire movie. Just one really long movie. But before I get started with the review, I have to go on a rant. Because one of the things that has bugged me to no end with every single new episode that came up with WandaVision is how many people said WandaVision's failing, or it's taking forever to just get to the point of what it's trying to do. And I'm like, have you guys never watched a TV show that airs weekly? I like to watch TV shows weekly rather than all at once. That's one of the reasons why I'm not much of a binger, because there's a nice little period of time where I get to anticipate what comes next. And man, people are just so goddamn impatient nowadays. How did you all survive through Game of Thrones? How did y'all survive through Breaking Bad? And between the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones, we had to wait an additional year for that final season to air. It wasn't worth it at the end, but still, we had to wait an extra year to get to that final season. So how did y'all get so spoiled so quickly? So anyway, that's my rant. What's going on with WandaVision? Why does this show take place within a sitcom? Why do the sitcoms keep changing decades? Well, the first 2 episodes don't really tell you that. We get a vague answer on why everything appears to be a sitcom in episode 4, thanks to Darcy Lewis, who is now a doctor, not an intern anymore. But we don't get our true answer until we get into episode 8. And the reasoning behind that is because Wanda has really fallen into a pit of depression. After she got snapped back into existence by Professor Hulk, after she attended Tony Stark's funeral, after she fought Thanos and nearly tore him to pieces, she can't seem to get on with her life. Vision's body's been taken into custody by SWORD, and she just goes into full depression because the love of her life is dead and being dismantled by another government agent that has been around for a long time, but we've never seen. That's fine, whatever. So she ends up going to the site of this house that she and Vision were going to live in, and she has the deed to this little location. There's no house built there yet, but there's a little heart that says, to grow old in, V. And I'm just jumping into that moment right away, but that is really a sad moment for Wanda. She breaks down and she doesn't have control of her powers, to the point where she pretty much creates an entire area. She creates her own house with her powers. She creates a brand new Vision from her powers, because her powers came from the Mind Stone, and the Vision was mostly powered through the Mind Stone, not the Soul Stone like I accidentally said in the last video. And that's how Vision comes back to life, and that's why everything appears to be black and white and in a sitcom world. But why a sitcom world? Why specifically that? Well, when Wanda was growing up with her parents and Pietro and Sokovia, they watched a lot of sitcoms, ranging from The Dick Van Dyke Show, Bewitched, The Brady Bunch, Full House. So sitcoms pretty much bring her comfort and is just her escapism. And it's in this entire episode, episode 8, where we get to witness Wanda's full backstory. We get to see the events that she and Pietro told Ultron about, where her parents were killed by a Stark missile, and they waited 2 days for that missile to explode and kill them. We get to see why she volunteers to be a Hydra experiment and how she managed to survive along with her brother. We get to see the first time she's at the Avengers compound, watching Malcolm in the Middle and just having a conversation with Vision. There's a lot in this episode that really delves into Wanda's past, but also makes her a complete character. Like I said when I talked about the first 2 episodes when they aired, Wanda was always one of the more underutilized Avengers. I always liked her, but she didn't really do a whole lot outside of being a supporting character. And thanks to this show, and specifically this episode, we get to know a whole lot more about Wanda Maximoff, and it makes her one of the star players of the MCU, especially with what they have planned going forward. Now, as for the Vision, Vision is dead. Like, this Vision that we're seeing in the show is not the same Vision that we were familiar with. Like I said, Vision is completely dead, or so we think. I'll get back to that a little later. And while Paul Bettany does a really great job with comedy, especially when he pulls inspiration from Dick Van Dyke, there are a lot of moments where the Vision is just so uncertain of what's going on. There are several clues throughout the rest of these sitcom-type episodes to reveal that something isn't all right, and that even though Wanda created this world, maybe she's not in full control. And one of the biggest aspects of that involves the return of Pietro Maximoff, or at least that's what Wanda is led to believe. Not played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, but played by Evan Peters, who played Peter Maximoff in the X-Men movies. Now, I knew that Evan Peters was going to be in this series, but when they introduced him as Pietro, I instantly thought, this is not Pietro, because they establish in episode 5, the episode where he debuts, that Wanda cannot bring the dead back to life. And technically, she brought Vision to life, but Vision was a synthezoid. He was not organic, and it helped that he was powered by the Mind Stone, which gave Wanda her powers. So Pietro pops up at the end of episode 5. You have a great line of dialogue from Darcy, who's watching the entire thing play out, where she says, "She recast Pietro?" And that made me laugh. But you can tell that Wanda is very surprised by this happening, and she just doesn't know how to feel. You could tell that she's not really in control of this little aspect. And then in episode 6, which is based more off of Malcolm in the Middle, whereas episode 5 was based off Full House, there are a lot of clues to indicate that this is not really Pietro Maximoff. I mean, again, I figured that Pietro was permanently dead, and this is somebody messing with Wanda. And throughout the entire episode, they drop little hints here and there that Evan Peters is not playing Pietro Maximoff, and it makes sense that he wouldn't be playing Pietro. In fact, when we get to episode 8, Kathryn Hahn's character, who starts out as the nosy neighbor, Agnes, but is revealed to be the series villain, Agatha Harkness, I'll get back to that a little later, she refers to Evan Peters' character as fake Pietro, or Pietro, and then in the finale, they pretty much pull a Mandarin from Iron Man 3, where all this time he's just an actor, but they set up that reveal. They, again, established in several episodes that Evan Peters is not playing Quicksilver, Pietro Maximoff. And yet, despite all that, Twitter decided to go, "Why would you trick us like that, Marvel?" And I'm just sitting here going, I'm not amused, as the Vision would say. Now let's get back to Agatha the Harkness, because the series actually did a pretty good job not really showcasing a villain, and sometimes making you think that Wanda herself was the villain. Which, if that was the case and they stuck with that, that really wouldn't line up with everything that we have been shown in terms of the previous films, more specifically the ones that the Russos did. So at the end of episode 7, which pays homage to Modern Family in a very, very brilliant way, because Modern Family is one of my favorite sitcoms. At the end of the episode, we find out who's been messing up everything and who's been pulling every evil string, and it's been Agatha all along. I can't actually sing that song out of fear that I'm going to get a copyright claim or a strike, but man, that song just kills. And big props to Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez, who prior to this wrote the songs for Frozen. I mean, there's a reason why Let It Go became such a big phenomenon. And the songs here that replicate the beginnings of sitcoms are just as great. So big props to them and the songs that they've created. But anyway, Kathryn Hahn starts off as the nosy neighbor. And at first you think that she's one of the victims, mainly when you get to episode 3 and episode 6. But when there's a little suspicious moment in episode 5 where she pops up out of the bushes with the dead dog, Sparky, that WandaVision and their kids have adopted, you think there's something a little suspicious there. And once it's actually revealed that she's the villain, she's still a lot of fun to watch. She is just as fun at playing the villain of the series as she is the nosy neighbor, but at the same time, I didn't think her motives were really that clear-cut. I guess she just wants to try to wipe out all witches and become the most powerful of the bunch. I've only watched the finale once, so I'm gonna have to rewatch that and see if I missed anything. But I just thought her motives were not that clear-cut. They are more clear-cut, I think, than Hayward, the acting director of Sword. I'll get back to him a little later because that's a big negative of the show for me. And in terms of your other characters, you have Jimmy Woo, played again by Randall Park, who we last saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I love his introduction because if you remember Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I did a watch party of it back on Thursday, one of the big things he's trying to accomplish, outside of catch Scott Lang, is work that close-up magic trick. And the very first time we see him and he introduces himself to Monica Rambeau, he's nailed the card trick. And I actually like Jimmy Woo a lot in this series, mainly because in Ant-Man and the Wasp, while he wasn't actually a villain, he was more of an obstacle, and I just didn't really care for him altogether. In this series, I actually really liked him, which is a really nice turnaround for a character that I wasn't that big a fan of, but not as big of a turnaround as what they do with Darcy Lewis, because when this series was announced, and it was announced that Kat Dennings would be returning as Darcy, I kind of rolled my eyes a bit, because the last time we saw her was in Thor: The Dark World, which is really a chore to watch in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't think it's terrible, but it's certainly rough. It's a rough watch. And Darcy was literally nothing but comic relief, and I thought she was completely useless in that movie. This time around, when we're introduced to her, she's now a doctor, she's now an astrophysicist, so she's no longer the comedic intern. And not only is she more helpful, and not only is she the one that comes up with a lot of the plans and the ideals of what's going on with this energy field that Wanda's created, but her comedic moments are actually really funny. She has great chemistry with Randall Park and even Teyonah Parris, who plays Monica Rambeau. It made me turn around to like Kat Dennings as Darcy Lewis, which I've always liked Kat Dennings, but Darcy, up until now, just never really worked for me. Speaking of Monica Rambeau, Teyonah Parris is a real standout here. Monica Rambeau in Captain Marvel wasn't much of a character. She was just there as the daughter of Maria Rambeau, and knowing Marvel, we figured that Monica was going to pop up later, because in the comics she's taken on many different names, one of them including Captain Marvel, which at the moment is taken, but she also takes on the name of Photon, which I imagine that's the name she's going to be taking on when we see her again in the rest of the series going forward, because she gets her powers in episode 7, and she is a great character in my opinion. She's charming, she knows what she's doing, she is confident, and you can tell that she takes up a lot from her mother and Carol Danvers, even though there are a few hints in this series that indicate that she and Carol had a falling out, because there's a moment when they talk about the ending to Endgame where Wanda came close to killing Thanos, and then Jimmy Woo says, well, I'd argue Captain Marvel came the closest, and there's this disdain on Monica's face, as if there's something that happened in between Captain Marvel and now to where they had a falling out. I don't know if that's the case, but there are a few clues that would indicate that that can happen. Because if you're wondering what happened to Maria Rambeau, she actually had cancer and died in between the 5 years that Monica was snapped out of existence. And there are some people out there that theorize that maybe Carol Danvers was responsible for Maria getting the cancer, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense considering that a lot of other characters have been around Carol Danvers and they seem to be fine. I don't know, who knows? That's an interesting theory, and if all that's true and that Monica Rambeau does have a falling out with Carol, that's going to lead to a very interesting dynamic when we see Carol and Monica again in Captain Marvel 2. I want to bring up the negatives really quickly. I don't have a whole lot because I think this show is fantastic, but there are a few things that kind of bugged me. I mentioned how I wasn't really sure what Agatha Harkness's motivation was or what her endgame was in the series finale, and that entire finale does feel a bit rushed. It's the longest episode of the series, but there's so much going on that I felt like maybe it could have been a little longer, but then again, if it had been a little longer, it could have been a feature-length film in that case. They introduced the concept of the White Vision, who I thought was going to be Ultron Reborn. Boy, was I wrong on that. The Vision that Wanda created had a fight with the White Vision, who was rebuilt from the real Vision's parts. It's a lot to process, but just bear with me. It ends with a conversation between both of them because the objective of the White Vision was to kill the real Vision, but the fake Vision that the White Vision thinks is the real Vision tells the White Vision that he is not the real Vision and that the White Vision is actually the real Vision. How many times can I say Vision? So it ends with the fake Vision transferring the subconscious of him and all the memories of Vision into the White Vision. And he has all the memories of the Vision now, but without the Mind Stone, he doesn't have the same personality that the Vision that we knew had. So clearly this is not the end of the Vision, because White Vision takes off, we don't see him again, but knowing Marvel, I'm sure he's going to come back at some point. Probably not Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, but we'll see. And then also one other element of the show that I think everyone can agree is not the best aspect. It's Hayward. I mentioned him earlier, and he's a weak minor villain, like a really, really weak one. I mean, I think the actor does a really good job of being a total dickhead to people. Like, he's rude to his fellow sword agents, he's rude to Darcy. He crosses a big line when he gets into an argument with Monica Rambeau and says, you know what, it's a good thing that you weren't around when your mother died. And when he said that line, I was like, shit, man, this guy's bad. Like, screw him. And then there's an element in the series where he shows his agents security footage of Wanda Maximoff breaking into S.W.O.R.D. and stealing the Vision's body, which when you watch that footage, security seems to be at an all-time low because nobody attempts to stop her, and nobody seems to care that she's just walking into a secure government facility. Turns out he tampered with that footage, and it's not really clear why. Like, he creates the White Vision to take out Vision and Wanda, but you don't really know what his motivation is. I get his purpose is trying to save this entire town, but he doesn't really know the true reasonings for what's happening, and it doesn't seem like he wants to know. Is his end goal to start a war with the Avengers? Because his plan is to kill Wanda Maximoff, and that's not going to sit well with the Avengers. Like, you kill one of their most powerful members, what does that prove? Like, the Avengers will come after you if you succeed in that. Now, granted, he doesn't succeed, but his plan just made no sense at all. Clearly, it was poor planning from the get-go. That's the weakest aspect of this series for me, despite how much the actor does a good job of being a prick. But on a whole, I think this show is absolutely fantastic and a perfect start to the new post-Infinity Saga era of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The level of detail that they go into to recreating the look of these sitcoms, like The Brady Bunch, Modern Family, Full House, Malcolm in the Middle, Dick Van Dyke, and Bewitched, is spot on, and the comedy is impeccable. It's perfect, the characters are great, the action does kick a lot of ass and has the same quality of effects that the movies do. And I mentioned Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Another huge compliment that I can give this show is that it sets up events that will lead into that movie, but it doesn't feel like a commercial for that movie. Because I know a lot of people have criticized some of the other MCU movies for being commercials for the next movie. I can kind of get with people on that level, even though it doesn't bother me. But this series is just focused on being a self-contained story, making Wanda a much more complete character than she ever was before. And the only things that feel like setup are just events that happen in the movie. There's no other ties to other characters. And Stephen Strange doesn't even make an appearance here, which I was quite shocked at. Since Kevin Feige has said that WandaVision is going to feed right into Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, I was convinced that Benedict Cumberbatch would cameo, but I was wrong. And I I'm kind of grateful for that because this doesn't feel like a commercial for Doctor Strange 2. I think this is a fantastic show. It has its problems, sure, but on a whole, it's worth seeing in your lifetime. Like I said before, this is a fantastic start to Phase 4. It's very funny, it's very heartfelt, and if nothing else, this proves why I'm a huge fan of the series and why I love these characters. Because the series at the heart of it is based on its characters and how they grow and how they handle these situations. And at the end of it, it made me even more excited for not only the future of the series, but the future of these Disney Plus shows. Because if the rest of them, like Falcon the Winter Soldier, Loki, Miss Marvel, Moon Knight, Armor Wars, and etc., can be as badass as WandaVision, then I'm excited. I have long said that when Avengers Endgame comes out, I'm done with the MCU because that was a great self-contained story that spanned several movies and several years. But after seeing this, I am even more excited for the future and to see what they come up with next. And there you go, that's my review for the entire series of WandaVision. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I am continuing my watch parties for the MCU. We only have 5 movies left to go, and this Tuesday will be Doctor Strange at 6 p.m. and Thor Ragnarok this Thursday at 6 p.m. as well. And then Falcon and the Winter Soldier comes out this week. I'll have my review out for episode 1 once I see it. And I'm excited. I'm really excited to see what the future of this series holds. But now I want to know what you guys think about WandaVision. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one. Hello everyone, I just wanted to say thank you all for watching my full review of WandaVision. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to follow me on social media, whether that is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, my Twitch channel, or you can go support me on Patreon. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day and take care of yourselves.